Everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we're looking at Peter denying that he knows Jesus or denying Jesus. And if you remember, we talked about this a couple last week. Um, and when Jesus predicted that Peter would. And so this is actually recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we're going to read from Luke's version here because there's a couple of details that Luke adds into this one that I really like that stands out to me. And so we're going to go through that. This is Luke 22:54 through 62. And it says, and Peter followed at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, this man was one of Jesus' followers. But Peter denied it. Woman, he said, I don't even know him. After a while, someone else looked at him and said, you must be one of them. No, I'm not, Peter retorted. About an hour later, someone else insisted, this man must be one of them because he is Galilean too. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you are talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. Now, this would be the hard part right here, right? So he hears the rooster crows. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny me three times deny three times that you even know me. I couldn't imagine sitting there and having Jesus looking at you after you just denied who he was three times. The guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him. Well, that was part of what we read. The other read. So this happened. So well, really, if you look at this on the timeline of things, this took place like during the questioning of Jesus while he was being questioned, and so we see all this happening. But I could not imagine denying one of my best friends, right? And then having and then him being the Messiah too, and then him looking at you after you do it. I mean, that would just be heartbreaking. And so we see here that that Peter denied that he knew Jesus using. He also does this. He uses. I can't remember if it's in Matthew or Mark's. It may have been in John's, but I think it was in Matthew and Mark's account where he denied knowing Jesus and he used an oath. Right? He swore, and so like when it says swearing, it's not using foul language. It was kind of like the swearing or the taking an oath that a person does in court. He was swearing that he did not know Jesus and was invoking a curse on himself if the words were true. Again, I didn't read this. Again, I'm sorry. I think it was in Matthew and Mark. But again, so not only does he go to the point of denying Jesus, he goes to the point of bringing a curse on it. It's like he's saying, like, curse me if I'm lying, right? If I'm not telling you the truth, in effect, I guess if you really want to say, he was saying, may God strike me dead if I'm lying, And then the third time he does it, right? Jesus is sitting there looking at him, and I just couldn't imagine, and we know that Peter's experience in the next few hours, this was going to change his life, and it was going to change it for good. But man, he had to go through some stuff first. He was going to change from a half-hearted follower to a repentant disciple, and finally to the kind of person Christ could use to build his church. Because remember, he said upon Peter's confession that Jesus was Lord, he was going to build his church. And then Peter becomes one of the main people, right? One of the main people in growing the church. But then the other thing we see is Peter wept bitterly, not only because he realized that he had just denied the Lord, right? He had just done that, who was the Messiah, but also because he had turned away from a very dear friend, a person who had loved and taught him for at least 3 years. And so, I mean, he just betrayed not only his Lord, not only his Messiah, but his best friend too. And so, he was, man, it was just heartbroken, and I understand why. But from the human side, I mean, I understand why he did it. He was scared, right? We talk a big game, and then the military soldiers show up, the police show up, and you see him drag this guy away, and he's scared. And so, why we can't excuse it, I think as from a human standpoint, we can understand it. But Peter had said he would never deny Christ, despite Jesus telling him he would. But again, like I said, when frightened, he went against everything he had talked about. And if you think about it, he was real truthfully unable to stand up for the Lord for even 12 hours. I mean, probably less than that. If you want to, but from the time they said that to the time he was arrested, and he failed as a disciple, and he failed as a friend. But the wonderful thing about this, which we're going to see after the resurrection, is even with a total failure like this, if we have a total failure in our life, we can come back from it, right? And we're going to talk about that. We're going to look at the contrast between Peter and Judas, right? Both of them had the ability or the opportunity to come back. Only one took it. And so we're going to look at that and see. And so the main thing I want us to get out of this is yes, Peter denied Jesus, but here's the thing: he betrayed Jesus. We'll put it that way too. Is we're all guilty of the same thing. We can come down hard on Peter, but the truth is we're all guilty. We're all just as guilty. We've all done things. We've all got sins in our lives. We've all got stuff that would be considered of denying or betraying Jesus. Some of us may have even denied knowing Christ or denied being a Christian because we were afraid what others might think of it, or hid from it. And so we're all guilty of some sort of betrayal of Christ. The wonderful thing is that we all have the opportunity to come back and seek forgiveness and repent of those sins and all that. That's the wonderful thing of God's grace that covers us, but it's Jesus' death that made that possible. So just remember that. Remember, before you get too hard on Peter, that we're all just like Peter. So we need to remember that. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching and following along and continuing to comment, ask, we've had prayer requests, we've had, discussions in different chats and stuff like that. And I love it. I love a wonderful, fun conversation, even if we don't agree on stuff, as long as it's respectful. I love conversation because that's how we learn. And so I really do appreciate that. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, go ahead and do that, because we're going to continue to dive deeper into other studies as we go along. And as always, I appreciate everyone for watching.